Next, what I'd like to do is show you how to make an authenticated request against this API, because quite often patient data like this, it's protected. Not just anyone can call it. You need to be authenticated. And that means I should come into this patient's controller and add an authorize attribute. As we know from the identity module, that means no anonymous access to anything inside of this controller. And to demonstrate that, let me take the existing default page we have and try to run it against this controller now. But I'm going to copy it into the patient data folder so that we're not dealing with CORS and authentication. We're just dealing with authentication issues. And this default, I'm going to close it so it doesn't confuse me. This default that I have now copied into this project, it's no longer doing cross-origin. It's more like an authenticated request, or it will need to be an authenticated request. And I need to make one more change in here. I need to take out jQuery version 2. That's what I installed in the CORS project. Unfortunately, an MVC application doesn't use jQuery 2 because it does have some breaking changes. It uses a version of jQuery that is still compatible with all of the unobtrusive validation features that are built into MVC. But with the proper jQuery script in place, I should now be able to run this version of the default page, view it in a browser, and try to get patients. And the response will come back that authorization has been denied, HTTP status code 401. Now I need some way to log into the site. In fact, I need some way to register on the site. Currently on this site, there is no UI for user registration or login. It's all provided by that account controller, which is entirely API based. So if I open up the help page again, which is at /help, we'll see that the account controller provides a number of methods. The first one I want to tackle is register, because we'll have to register a user. So API/account/register. This method says that if I just send a post request, and that post request includes username, password, and confirm password, that means I can register a user. So let me try to build the UI for that in this simple HTML page. And mind you, this is not going to be a pretty UI. The goal here is to work with identity and authorization, not to get bogged down in building something up with Bootstrap. So I just need an input type equals text. The name I will call username, which is just what the API controller expects. The case doesn't matter. It's going to be a case-insensitive match. But I do need username, password, and confirm password. So name equals username, and I'll just use a placeholder so I know which one this is. Also an input type equals password, with a name of password, and the placeholder here can be password. And then I need an input that will confirm the password. So I could probably just copy that input and change the name to confirm password. And then an input that will be a button. So type submit, ID will be register, and the value I will display will be register. Very good. I think we're off to a good start. Now I just need JavaScript to hook this up. Let's preview that page. And it seems good. I can enter a name, a password, confirm the password, and then register. So down here in the script, in addition to wiring up the get patients, I will wire up the register button. When someone clicks that, I want to call a register function. And the register function can look like the following. I'll go ahead and add return false here to prevent the browser from navigating before I forget. But what URL do I need to call into? I need to call into /API/account/register. So API, account, register. And what data do I need to send along? I need to send the data that is in that form. So the form was called user data, and I want to serialize it. That will give me a string with all of the inputs, URL encoded into that string. So yes, the ID is user data. And then all I need to do is post to that URL with this data. And again, I always just want to dump out the response so that we can see what comes back. So let's try this. I'll save the page and refresh to reload the script. And let me try to register without filling anything out. And I'll get back an HTTP status 400 bad request. Model state validation failed. It tells me that I need a username, tells me that I need a password. So we reached the right endpoint. I just need to fill in some details. So username is Scott, I'll fill out a password that I hope I can remember and click register. And now it looks like we got back an empty response, but that should be an HTTP 200 status code. I am registered. Can I now get to the patients? The answer is no, because what happens is that I need to capture an access token, and I need to send that access token now along with every request. It's not just a cookie like it was with forms authentication. There's now a specific HTTP header that I need for these API calls. And that's not really well documented anywhere, but what I need to do now is log in to the website with the credentials that I've used during registration and have the website return to me that access token. The interesting thing is, if you look in the account controller, you will not find any methods or any endpoints available that say log in or get access token. That's because getting this access token is not part of the account controller actually. It's part of OWYN middleware. How do you find these things out? Well, in my case, it took quite a bit of digging in the code to figure out what was going on. But if we look in Startup Auth for this project, one of the first things you'll notice is the configuration of some OAuth authorization server options. It appears to be setting up a token endpoint path of /token, and indeed, that is where I want to go if I want to try to log in with a username and password. I need to post to /token with my username and password. That will return to me an access token. And this OAuth authorization server, it is configured into the OWYN middleware to listen at that endpoint and enable this to happen. And in fact, I can hit that endpoint from a browser. What it will just tell me though is that I need to pass along some sort of grant type. It tells me unsupported grant type. That's because that token endpoint needs a piece of data that says grant_type equals, and the type of grant we're going to be passing is password. How do I know that? Again, at this point right now it's source code, but this is what is set up for MVC and WebAPI. So let's try to build this out. What I now need to do in default HTML is sort of have this form function as both a register form and a logon form. It would be nice if I could switch between two different views to do that, but since I don't want to take up all of your time, I'm just going to go ahead and create another button here, a login button, and I'll click that when my intention is to log in and not register a new account. It'll still have the fields that I need. The confirm password won't be needed for logging in. I'll pass it along to the server and it's just going to be ignored. That's okay. The important thing is I get through the username and the password, and it has to go to the right location. So down here, let's wire up a click event on login and call a function called login. So login is a function that will ultimately return false so the browser doesn't navigate, and the URL I want to go to this time is just that URL that we see here, /token. And the data that I want is still the data from the form, so I just want to serialize user data, serialize all of it, and since that code is duplicated, I should really do some refactoring, but again, that's something I'll do after we're done recording. But I need to add something additional to that data. I need to pass along a grant type so that I don't get this error message. So the data will equal data plus ampersand grant_type equals password. So I want you to grant me an access token based on this username and password. And with that, let's post that to the URL, that data. And of course, I then always want to show the response. And before we go any further, let's just test that out. I should be able to come back to this page, refresh, and now let me try to log on with the username and password that I created earlier, and I can see that that worked because the response includes an access token. Now what I need to do is when this response comes back, I need to take this access token, I need to save it off somewhere, and then I need to send it along on the subsequent requests so that those requests can be authenticated. And when I go to get patient data, I'll need to send along this access token so that OWYN middleware can see that, pull it out, establish my identity, and that will allow me through the authorize filter. So that's what we'll work on next. In addition to showing the response, I want to wire up a success handler that will save the access token. So access token will be I'll need to save it into a variable somewhere or local storage, session storage, somewhere on the browser. I'll just create a variable for now that starts off as an empty string, But this function is something that I'll write that will grab that. So save access token is a function. It will be passed the data from the response. What I want to do is just say my local access token. I want to save access underscore token from the data that comes back. Access underscore token. Is it access underscore token? Yes, it's access underscore token. So now this piece of information will be saved into a variable and it's available from other requests, like the request to try to get data. I'll need to send that along in a header. So I won't be using get anymore. Let me use Ajax instead. An Ajax call allows me to specify the headers. So I still want to do Ajax to URL, and that would be this URL, which is really something that I should bring up here as a local variable, since this is the only function that uses it. And overall, there could be a better way to build these URLs, but for now, that's my URL. I want to do an Ajax request there. I want the type of that request to be a GET request, and I want to pass along some headers. Let me just invoke a function that will compute the headers for me. And then, as always, I want to show the response. And now we just need one last function, a function called getHeaders. That will be a function that needs to take that access token. So if the access token is truthy, then I want to return an authorization header. So this OAuth2 bearer authorization header, you can look it up in an RFC, but it is essentially, you need the string authorization, and the value for that header will be bearer plus the access token. So let's save default HTML. Let's come back to this page. Let's refresh. Let me log in one last time. We should now have that access token. Let me press get patients with fingers crossed. And now I can get to the patient information because that access token flows along. So a little bit complicated because sometimes we need to go to the account controller. Sometimes we need to go to ON middleware. Hopefully that improves in the future. But you could certainly wrap up some of the jQuery code I've written into a nice library so that it becomes very easy for front-end developers to do this. And now we have a page, a single page where a user can register, they can log in, they can get patient data. It's not the prettiest page. It could certainly use some UI improvements, but it is asynchronously calling the web API and making authenticated calls. Let's look at how this could be just a little bit fancier.